So ComfyUI is coming up to 2 years old, and I've done quite a number of courses in ComfyUI, or at least courses that involve ComfyUI and have ComfyUI in common. But I haven't done a course that really gives a broad basic introduction into what ComfyUI actually is for people who are complete newcomers and beginners. So this course will act as a basic introduction to ComfyUI. It is not a tutorial on how to install and use ComfyUI. It is background information. It is a description of the uses of ComfyUI and the advantages of ComfyUI. And I'm going to try to explain in this course why ComfyUI has become such a popular tool in generative AI, what the current snapshot view of ComfyUI looks like, what it looks like at this moment in time, and what possible avenues there may be for the development of ComfyUI in the future. Now, ComfyUI has got a very steep learning curve, and in this course overview, which really is intended just to get you familiar with what ComfyUI is, we're not going to have enough time to do the very technical stuff of how to set things up and how to get everything running. That'll be for a different course. We're going to cover generative AI, ComfyUI overview, the history of ComfyUI, and I'm going to take quite a bit of time to look at the hardware, what sort of hardware you need, and what the implications of different hardware is. We're going to look at the core features of ComfyUI, and we're going to take a look at the really important question of the ComfyUI community. We'll take a look at the security aspect of ComfyUI, and then we'll also take a look at recent developments. And after you finish this, you might want to go on to another course, maybe to get hands-on experience. That is going to be a completely different course. Now, it's impossible to talk about ComfyUI without talking about generative AI. ComfyUI and generative AI really go together. ComfyUI is a tool for building generative AI workflows. And in this lecture, I want to start exploring the world of generative artificial intelligence and really kind of explain how ComfyUI fits into that. The most significant thing about generative AI is that it's a form of technology which evolves and progresses at an astonishingly fast rate. There's never been anything quite like generative AI in terms of how fast it evolves. The internet, computing, anything that's gone before has not evolved at the speed at which generative AI evolves. ComfyUI has been able to adapt and to really keep up with the pace of evolution of generative AI. Generative AI refers to algorithms that can generate new content, whether it's text, 3D models, images, audio, music, and they can do this by learning patterns from existing data. The technology has a very wide range of applications. It can be used to create art, it can be used to create and design products, it can be used for marketing. There's a huge range of possible applications. It's fair to say it's a technology which is currently changing the world. Now, ComfyUI is an open source, node-based graphical user interface that facilitates complex generative AI workflows. It allows users to construct processes visually by connecting various functional nodes. Each node represents a specific operation within the workflow. This design offers flexibility and customization, and this enables users to create intricate generative processes without extensive coding knowledge. Now, throughout this course, we're going to be delving into the history, the features, some of the benefits and challenges of using ComfyUI, and hopefully providing you with a comprehensive overview of the software. So let's take a look at something of the history of ComfyUI so you can understand how things have got to where they are now. In the origins of ComfyUI, we have its launch in 2023, January. And this is shortly after Stable Diffusion came out from Stability AI. The software was able to handle Stable Diffusion and became one of the more popular ways of using Stable Diffusion. Now, this is a project that has evolved hugely, even as generative AI has evolved over time. The originator of ComfyUI was Comfy Anonymous, who released it on GitHub in January 2023. the purpose was to have a way of running generative AI with a more kind of intuitive, more powerful, more flexible user interface. Now, I think it's fair to say the user interface is not everyone's preferred method of using software like Stable Diffusion, but it is something which is, once you get used to it, very powerful. The creator of ComfyUI worked with Stability AI for some time, left in 2024, in June of 2024, and started an organization called comfy.org. And this was with a number of other developers who had been involved with ComfyUI over the preceding year. And in July of 2024, NVIDIA integrated ComfyUI into its RTX Remix modding software. This is software that, I think gamers will be able to explain this a little bit better than I can, but it allows you to take old games and then to repurpose them with new textures and new graphics so that they can be used again with much more up-to-date hardware. Now, that was just the first of a number of use cases where ComfyUI has been taken on board by companies like NVIDIA for purposes of using it as part of one of their products or services. The software became very popular, and by November 2024, it had 58,000 GitHub stars, which is a pretty good recommendation from the GitHub community. There have been also massive amounts of contributions from other developers, and the developers are developing what's known as custom extensions, which these are integrated into ComfyUI. They're basically like plugins, and you use these to extend the functionality of ComfyUI. And there are probably now more than about 10,000. Well, some estimates over 10,000 of these custom nodes have been developed, and even a beginner can start using some of these custom nodes without too much trouble. Now we're going to move on to talk about hardware, which is a very important facet of using generative AI, and we're going to look at it in relation to ComfyUI because there are some specific pieces of hardware that turn out to be very useful for working with generative AI. And somehow or another, over the years, graphics cards have become the most important aspect of this hardware that we use in processing the models. So in this lecture, I want to give you a broad overview of the kind of hardware you might come across and how it relates to ComfyUI. We'll start off with probably the most used form of hardware, which is NVIDIA. And NVIDIA has graphics cards that have been around for more than 20 years. And they're probably the ones that are most often recommended for working with ComfyUI. So all the NVIDIA GPUs from the last 10 years, since the Maxwell generation GTX 900, are supported in PyTorch, and they work very well. However, the 3000 series, the RTX 3000 series and above, are recommended for best performance. Generally, you will get more performance with more VRAM. Now, there are situations where you want to be careful in just focusing on VRAM alone, because it's not the be-all and end-all for performance. Older generations of cards will work, however, performance might be worse than expected because they don't support certain operations. Now, when it comes to NVIDIA hardware, there are trade-offs, and these trade-offs are needed to make use of memory efficiently. Memory is one of those bottlenecks that we encounter in graphics hardware. The summary for NVIDIA hardware. Now, there are several generations of NVIDIA hardware. They tend to come out about once every 2 years or so, and each generation has different characteristics. One of the older generations, which gave us the famous 1080, is the 10 series. This is fairly slow when working with ComfyUI and the models that we use. It works only at full precision FP32. Now, precision is an important factor, and if we could, we probably would work at FP32, but FP32 tends to be somewhat slower than lower precisions. And the trade-off there is between precision and, if you have very, very good precision, you often have very slow speeds. So sometimes we want lower precision and higher speeds. And that's the reason why, as we go through the years, we see that the graphics cards from NVIDIA actually start losing precision. So they all have FP16, but as we come to the later series, we find that they have lower and lower precision, because the lower precisions quite often are much faster when deployed with artificial intelligence. So at the 16 series, we have FP16 for the 20 series. These are very similar architectures. For the 30 series, we add BF16, which is another very useful precision. And then we have the 40 series, and these added FP8, which allows inferencing at a much faster speed than BF16 or FP16. In the later series, which are just coming out, we have the 50 series called the Blackwell cards, and these add FP4, which is super fast, but also lower precision. And then we have FP6, which has also been added. Now, the more precisions that you can actually work to, the more trade-offs you can actually explore. So ideally, you want to go with a 50 series card, and if you can't, then the 40, and if you can't, then the 30 series. But as you can see, the 16 and the 20 series also have some degree of usefulness when working with these models. Now, the tables here, I've constructed them partly from my own research, partly from some research by ComfyUI. And one of the notes that ComfyUI made is note that this table doesn't mean that it's completely unsupported to use FP16 on 10 series. For example, it just means it's going to be slower because the GPU can't handle it natively. Now, with that note ringing in our ears, we'll move on and start talking about AMD and Linux. Now, AMD officially supported in PyTorch on Linux. It works well if the card is officially supported by ROCm, but they're slow compared to equivalent NVIDIA GPUs because of a lack of an optimization in PyTorch. Now, PyTorch is very important in artificial intelligence. It's a piece of, it's a set of tools that were developed by Facebook Research, and it's now a part of Meta, and it is used extensively in generative AI. So one of the things you'll sometimes find is with certain hardware, you might get some aspect of PyTorch not working properly. That's the case with AMD Linux cards. And we find also that unsupported cards might be a real pain to get running. Now, moving on and further, we come to the next option, which is Mac with Apple Silicon. Now, when you're working in Mac OS with ComfyUI, PyTorch is supported, and that's important, but it does experience random breaks with operation system updates. It can be fairly slow, particularly compared to the NVIDIA situation, and some operations are not properly supported. Now, Apple is making progress, and they have a lot of positive aspects to them, but you'll find that they're not necessarily at the moment as good as working with NVIDIA graphics when using ComfyUI. When we move on and start looking at AMD on Windows, it requires a PyTorch extension, which is PyTorch DirectML or a custom Zluda PyTorch build. So I'm not sure exactly what's happening with Zluda, but with DirectML, it can work with Windows, but you do find sometimes the installations have a tendency to break, and that's the real issue. Things might improve in future once they have PyTorch ROCm working on Windows. Now we move on to the next set, and that's going to be Intel, Linux, and Windows. It works, but it requires a custom PyTorch extension, and there are sometimes some issues. ComfyUI says he expects things to improve over time, especially once it is officially supported in PyTorch. So there have been some issues with Intel and Windows, and it has been kind of like a bit of a head scratcher what's happening with Intel, because sometimes they work and then they kind of break and then they work again. And in my experience, it is sometimes really slow working with Intel. And then we move on to Qualcomm AI PCs. These are very new, and this is a development which I don't think many people were expecting, but Qualcomm came up with AI PCs, which essentially tend to be laptops. PyTorch doesn't work at all with them. And I would say the hardware faces serious challenges when working with ComfyUI. It may not ever really, with the current generation of Qualcomm AI PCs, might not get off the ground. There's a lot of work to be done, and maybe in next generation Qualcomm AI PCs, they might have things working. So fingers crossed, but for the time being, you probably don't want to favor Qualcomm AI PCs if you want to work with ComfyUI. Some of the really, really large models, you kind of have to research how well they work with different hardware. And sometimes we actually get adjustments that are made for those precisions. So sometimes you may find, oh, you don't have enough memory, but if you can adjust the precision of a particular model, you may find that it will actually work with hardware that you thought was not going to be able to perform very well. So there are a lot of options and a lot of trade-offs, and this brief guide acts as an introduction to some of the most important considerations. Now, there are a number of things that we could consider to be core features of ComfyUI. And at least I like to consider them core features. These are the node-based workflow design, which is important because it really determines how everything falls together in ComfyUI. It gives a fairly steep learning curve to the software, but it's also why the software is so efficient and so easy to adapt and customize. It makes the software very, very, very successful for a wide range of different use cases. It integrates with various models, not just diffusion models, but other generative AI models, and this gives it enormous flexibility. And thirdly, it is imbued with an asynchronous queue management system and memory optimization features. These are very important for efficiency, and we can actually take a bit of a closer look at how all of this falls together. And we'll start off by looking at the node-based workflow design. Now, you're seeing here an example of a very basic workflow inside of ComfyUI. And it is the kind of layout that we have when working with, in this case, generative AI for images. Now, with ComfyUI, every workflow will produce a somewhat different outcome, and there's almost an infinite variety of different workflows that you can assemble together. So all in all, I think that the design of ComfyUI makes it more accessible to people, especially once you really get into using it and understand what the powers are of the different use cases. It's very easy with ComfyUI to get stuck into the idea that you have to learn it in the way that you learn any other piece of software. You sit down at a desk and you learn things by rote. With ComfyUI, a lot of it is about being part of a larger community, which is producing all sorts of interesting designs, all sorts of interesting workflows, and sharing those. Now, this is probably for me the most important aspect of ComfyUI. It's this odd workflow that sort of resembles other workflows that you'll find in software like, say, Blender, but which has its own kind of unique flavor and unique characteristic because it does work so well, so exceedingly well for generative AI. Now, another ability of ComfyUI is its ability to integrate with various models, generative AI models. This gives it enormous flexibility. Now, what we're seeing here is just a small selection of different models, generative AI models, that can work with ComfyUI. This is a very, very small selection. It is incredibly flexible, and this flexibility isn't just something that happens by chance. The developers have to learn about the new techniques that are coming out, the new models. They have to develop nodes that can actually handle those and prototype workflows that can handle the new workflows. It's a lot of work, and ComfyUI has managed to keep up with the incredibly fast way that generative AI evolves over time. Some user interfaces have been very useful for a few months, maybe longer, and then they kind of fallen by the wayside because they haven't kept up with the incredible rate of change of generative AI. Now, when we move on to the core feature, which is asynchronous queue management and memory optimization. This is something which is a little bit technical in nature, but essentially in some user interfaces, when you start a process, the process has to start from the very start and continue all the way to the end. With ComfyUI, if you don't need to repeat part of a workflow, that part of the workflow is just not repeated. You only repeat the part of the workflow that will produce a different result. That gives it enormous efficiency. And the other thing about ComfyUI is memory optimization. It will work with a very large range of hardware. And if you have the right hardware, it is very, very, very quick. And it will adapt to different conditions. It will actually change how it works depending on your hardware. The memory optimization is very important because memory is one of the key areas where we have a limitation of resources. It's one of the bottlenecks in generative AI, and ComfyUI has managed to figure out how to use memory, usually in the most effective way. Most of the time, that's going to be your GPU memory. Sometimes you have to use system memory, but it knows how to do that. And it does that sort of almost behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about changing things a lot of the time. So that, I would say, is definitely these more technical features. I think that's a very, very important part of ComfyUI. Now, one of the things about ComfyUI, which is related to its customization and customizability and flexibility, is the question of the ecosystem and the community. This is part of what makes ComfyUI really flexible. And in particular, we're talking about the way that you can interact with other users of ComfyUI online, in communities and in forums. And this is a valuable way of gaining insights into what other people are doing, how they're working with ComfyUI, and as well as helping you to understand and fix problems that you might be experiencing. It's also a way of finding out what other, what solutions people are employing ComfyUI for. Now, the question of the ComfyUI community can be addressed in many different ways. We can think of it as the ComfyUI different forums, places where people have tutorials. Some people are working on documentation for ComfyUI. The core of ComfyUI is a community itself. Comfy.org has got a number of people who have come together to try to help build the software. And the goal at this moment is to try to turn ComfyUI into a sort of operating system for generative AI. And these people are working together. And their combined efforts obviously help to improve the project. One of the main things that is being integrated into ComfyUI, the ComfyUI Manager, I think started off actually as a separate project, which is now being brought into ComfyUI, which adds a lot of functionality to ComfyUI. A lot of community contributions have led to the creation of custom extensions and plugins enhancing the platform's functionality, but the collaborative environment also fosters innovation and ensures ComfyUI continues to evolve to meet the needs of its users. And that's, again, working into that sort of customization aspect of things. Now, ComfyUI is designed to be kind of a modular software. So it's designed to take things from many different people and to combine them into one. There are some challenges in doing that. And I think there are still standards that are evolving in terms of how different parts of ComfyUI can be brought together. Things can be shared securely, and it's difficult sometimes to avoid one thing that works really well breaking something else that works really well. So there are a number of challenges that need to be addressed, and those are being addressed by an attempt to create what's known as a registry of different custom nodes. That's very much work in progress, and so far the progress has been very good from what I can see. There are specific attempts being made to try to foster collaboration by people working inside of ComfyUI, so the people who are actually designing the workflows. There are attempts to make sure that they can work together with teams that may be sort of spread out. And actually, one of the very early successes in collaboration is the ability, one of the core abilities in ComfyUI is that you can share workflows really easily. And the workflows are files that are very small indeed. So you can pass them to someone else and they can look at the workflow, they can give you comments on it, and you can work together even if you're separated by quite some distance. Alongside a very strong community ethos in ComfyUI, there's also a security concept or security aspect. And this has to go alongside the community aspect, because almost all open source software that has a strong community will have some rogue members of the community, and those guys are going to cause problems sometimes with security. This is not an exception where ComfyUI is concerned. I produced this curation here of some information about a hack which was related to ComfyUI, which happened last year. This one involved a custom node called ComfyUI LLM Vision, and it's been fairly well documented. The information here basically borrows from some of the early attempts to understand what was happening. We now believe that the hackers were probably a Russian group who were acting against generative AI, or at least that was sort of their cover story. There have been quite a number of analysis which suggest that they attacked Disney and other organizations as well. But they attacked ComfyUI because they weren't in favor of generative AI. And this has led to some improvements in security with ComfyUI. Among the suggestions you'll find here, I'll have a link to this page. Is to carefully vet custom nodes and extensions before installation. And there are actually some improvements which have been done to the ComfyUI manager that help with that. And using software from reputable sources and popular projects, supporting and respecting developers of trusted software, and avoiding pirated or suspicious software, especially from untrusted sites. If you get anything from torrent, then you have a very high likelihood of getting some type of malware, sometimes very serious malware. Some surveys suggest as much as 1 in almost 2 in 5 software from torrent sites can contain some kind of payload, malware payload, and some of the malware can be extremely serious. Now, you find occasionally you get things like versions of Stable Diffusion leaked onto torrent, or you find maybe something to do with this DeepSeek model might be leaked somewhere. Just avoid any of those sorts of sources. Stick to trusted sources. And this is important as well if you're training staff, because there's quite a lot of evidence that indicates staff will try to use AI to get ahead in their career, even if you haven't authorized a particular source of models or other software. Now, I've used quite a number of open source projects which all have had issues to do with security. In terms of ComfyUI, I'm aware of just two incidents, which out of about 2,000 to 10,000, about 2 to 10,000 custom nodes is not too bad. That's a pretty decent result, and you can't be 100% perfect in terms of security. And I think the ComfyUI team are taking quite a lot of responsible actions to improve security. That said, I'll link to this if you want to read it. It's an interesting read, and there are some newer sources as well if you want to find out more. We are on comfy.org, which is the sort of command center for ComfyUI. And this is where many people might have started a course like this. This is where I'm going to end the course. There is so much more about ComfyUI that can't be put in a very short course like this. But if you want to learn more, this is one of the places where you can find out a little bit about what's happening. We can see here some images that are created inside of Comfy. And we can see also some of the projects that have used Comfy. So you are able to create images, video, you're able to create graphics like these. And there are lots of examples of how people are using ComfyUI today. So if you want to learn a little bit more, this is one place where you might be able to gain a little bit more insight, maybe even gain a little bit of inspiration. So I would leave you with this one. And also there are some community aspects here if you want to get a little bit more involved. So I think this is a good place to hand off and to say, welcome to the world of ComfyUI. I hope it's something that you look to investigate a bit more. There are lots of courses online, and hopefully this has been a very good introduction to what the capabilities are of this amazing platform. If you want to learn more about ComfyUI, including how to set it up and get everything going, you can take the Level 1 ComfyUI course, the Technical Introduction to Learning AI Workflows. That will give you everything you need to know about how to install and to start using the ComfyUI workflows. Now that course is available having just started with an exclusive coupon that you can use. You'll find a link to the coupon in this video, in the resources, and that will give you everything you need to know, a very up-to-date introduction to ComfyUI, how to actually use it, and what you need to do in terms of getting the models and different files set up so that you can actually get started and start experimenting. Now, it is a very intensive course, and remember that with generative AI, everything changes very, very quickly, and you'd want to get on board, find out what it's all about, and if you feel that you wanted to take things a little bit further, the Pixelvert Studio has got quite a lot of higher level courses that you can try out, and hopefully you will enjoy this journey.